You're now watching Sports Bettor's Paradise on the Bet Rivers Network.
All right, Jimmy Ott and Paul Stone, get ready for our best bets. We look at the high-profile games, and now we look at our best bets. And let's get started in the Sunshine State. Man, once upon a time, this was the best rivalry, on-field rivalry as far as the most talent. Miami, the U, and Bobby Bowden's Florida State teams. Not the case this year. Florida State undefeated last year, and Miami is undefeated this year. And how about it? 7-0 for Miami, 1-6 for Florida State. So what a tough year it's been for the Seminoles. And, 21-54.5 at Bet Rivers right now, Paul. And, boy, you look at the statistics and everything is just, as expected, lopsided. Miami second in the country in scoring at 48-plus points a game. Florida State just 15 for 267 in college football, including FCS. Yards per game, 577 to 276. We go on and on. You get it. I mean, it is lopsided. Here's the deal. Rarely am I going to lay a big number, but, of course, this all-time series is very close. Miami leads it by just 2 long-term, but Florida State's won the last 2 games in this one, but one thing I don't have to worry about is a team that's going to have an edge as a big favorite and a team that will take their foot off the gas as a big favorite. Trust me, no matter what the situations, what the score, what the record is, how bad Florida State looks, Miami is going to try and destroy them as bad as they possibly can. So, hey, get them while they're getting as good. Miami minus a 21 here for those reasons. So, again, Paul, you and I think are in the same boat. We rarely going to lay this type of number, but in this spot, I think just Miami's going to beat them as bad as they possibly can.
Yeah, I mean, Miami clearly the far superior team. You mentioned many of Florida State's statistical measures to this point. It's on offense, on defense. They obviously, banked on DJ Uyangale filling the void at quarterback, and that didn't work out. And now he's out, and the guys they have trying to fill the void, they're just not very good. It's such an about face from this time last year. So Miami, I agree with you. If Miami can win by 3 touchdowns, they'll win by 3. If they win by 6, they'll win by 6. There's no love lost here, and the Hurricanes certainly the far superior team.
All right, let's go to the SEC and Arkansas, Mississippi State. Arkansas, with their big win against Tennessee, had the bye week to kind of sober up a little bit from the celebrations. But LSU, after their walk-off win against Ole Miss, went into Arkansas and took the very first drive and, beat them handily. To my surprise, yours as well, Paul. So they're 4-3 right now. Mississippi State just 1-6. But Paul, good job last week because Mississippi State covers again. This is 3 in a row, and that's as tough of a run as you can see in college football. They go to Austin, go to Athens, and then host Texas A&M, who has the best conference record in the SEC right now, and covers easily at home. First-year coach, first-year freshman quarterback, on the improve. They're getting better, and now they're getting points at home. It's a much tighter line here, but Mississippi State catching 6.5 at home at Scott Field.
Yeah, I mean, at 1-6, Jeff Levy's first season at Mississippi State certainly has been a disappointment, but as you mentioned as well, they have shown dramatic improvement in the last 3 games against those ranked opponents that you mentioned, the conference's upper echelon in Texas, Georgia, and Texas A&M this past weekend. First of all, against Texas and Austin a few weeks ago, Mississippi State only trailed the Longhorns by 8 points late in the third quarter. The Longhorns, who were favored by 5 touchdowns, pulled away late, pulled that one out 35-13, but Mississippi State gets the money. And then the following week, their following game after a bye, Mississippi State travels to Georgia, getting 33.5 points. They stayed within shouting distance pretty much throughout that game, ultimately fall to the Bulldogs 41-31. And then last week, at home in Starkville against Texas A&M, Mississippi State gets within 7 points, 31-24 against visiting Texas A&M early in the fourth quarter. Can't get any closer. They ultimately lose that game 34-24, but they do get the money. And they also, even though it was marginal, they did outgain the Aggies 367-353. and it hadn't, shown itself yet in the win column. But you mentioned the Bulldogs' true freshman quarterback, Michael Van Buren, a big-time recruit, a one-time Oregon commit. Oregon doesn't just recruit anybody, so that tells you what he was thought of on the national recruiting scene. Actually, the 57th overall recruit in the 2024 ESPN 300. So this is a big-time guy with a strong arm. In his last two games against Georgia and Texas A&M, he's thrown for a total of 548 yards against two real good defenses there. You look at Arkansas, this is really a game that could, not only because of the caliber of opponent, because of the positioning of the opponent, could be a flat spot for the Razorbacks. Their last three games, they've played ranked opponents: Texas A&M, Tennessee, and LSU. Now they travel to Starkville to play Mississippi State, and on deck they have Ole Miss and Texas. So this really shapes up as a difficult spot for the Razorbacks. Plus, Arkansas only 1-8-1 against the spread their last 10 as a road favorite. Taylon Green certainly playing with a bum knee. He's at something less than 100%. I don't think their top running back, Jaquindon Jackson's going to play. Give me the Bulldogs, Mississippi State plus 6.5 over Arkansas.
Paul, being so close to that number and where you can afford it to go to 6, would you? And I always like to wait. I say chalk early, dogs late. When you're going to bet them, it's kind of just a basic approach. But do you wait to try and see if it goes to 7?
In this particular case, I don't know that I would, because it opened at 7, and 7 was available the first couple of days until the market matured, and now it's settled at 6.5 the last couple of days. So I don't know. I think it might go to 6. I think it's more likely, in my opinion, which can certainly be wrong, I think it's more likely to go to 6 maybe than go to 7. But that's certainly a great question, and a question that we always have to ask ourselves as sports bettors. Is there potentially going to be a better number if we stay patient and wait and see what happens in the marketplace? But I think in this case, since we've already seen 7 and it's gone, and it's been gone for a couple of days, I think I'd go ahead and take the plus 6.5.
All right. Don't forget our friends over at Bet Rivers. Players at Bet Rivers can play same-game parlays on college football and NFL games to earn squares. Our exclusive Squares game offers additional chances at profit boosts, bonus bets, and many $10,000 jackpots. Visit BetRivers.com or the Bet Rivers app for further details on our Squares opportunities. All right, double barrel action for us right here, Paul, both you and I. And, well, yes, indeed, an unranked team is favored over a ranked team, and for a lot of reasons. So, first of all, 95% of the time, that team is at home, which Central Florida is. And also, it's just a team that is, their ranking is certainly higher than their point spread value, their power rating within the odds makers. That's where BYU is. BYU's had an unbelievable season. There's no doubt they're undefeated, number 11 in the country. Central Florida opened up the season, and you were pretty high on them coming into the season. And Gus Malzahn, KJ Jefferson coming over. They had a lot of returning starters, had some explosive elements to it. They go to Fort Worth and win that come-from-behind win to go 3-0 on the season. But since then, they have dropped 4 in a row. 3 of those 4 losses, they have outgained their opponent. But, man, this is in BYU and Provo, those results are going to be a little bit exaggerated because that is a difficult place to play. The altitude, amongst other things, and it makes it a very a strong home field advantage for the Cougars. I got the Golden Knights minus the 2 here at home as well. Gus Malzahn's team. Paul, you like them also in this particular spot.
Yeah, I mean, you mentioned I was high on UCF coming into the year, and after they came from behind when they were clearly or appeared to be defeated, 3-0, it looked really good for the Knights, but it's been downhill since then. 4 straight losses for UCF. Not only one of the bigger disappointments in the Big 12, in my opinion, but one of the bigger disappointments in all of college football. Their transfer quarterback, KJ Jefferson, who came over from Arkansas in the transfer portal, just didn't pan out. So they've made the switch now to Miami, Florida, transfer Ja'Cory Brown. Brown really brings a running element to the position. He's an outstanding runner. In fact, in the last 2 games for UCF against Cincinnati and Iowa State, he's gained a total of 238 yards on just 29 carries. So 8.2 yards per carry the last 2 games, a big-time running threat. And, we talk about UCF being one of the sport's biggest disappointments. BYU, on the other hand, has been one of college football's biggest surprises. This is a team coming in here, like you said, their power rating is certainly lower, but they are number 11 in the AP poll. They are undefeated at 7-0, and they are squarely in the chase for one of the 12 playoff spots. That goes without saying, being 7-0 in the Big 12. But they have 3 wins by 6 points or fewer, and that includes last week's come from behind victory at home over Oklahoma State, 38-35. I think they expended a lot of energy in that victory over the Cowboys. As good as their story is, though, BYU's story, I believe the Cougars are operating, so to speak, on borrowed time. You look at them, they're 4-0 in Big 12 play, but they've actually been outgained by a total collectively of 85 yards in conference play. So that's a little bit of an indicator there. And their quarterback, Jake Resloff, he has been spectacular at times, no questions about it, but he still throws too many interceptions. He's thrown 7 interceptions on the year, has an interception rate of 3% on his career, which is a little bit too high. I think it's going to catch up to him at some point, and I think that's going to be this Saturday in Orlando. Again, UCF, just look at, we can think about this, and you've kind of hit on it, but they've lost 4 in a row. They're playing an undefeated team almost in November that's 7-0, and despite being 3-4, they're favored. So the betting markets are speaking to us, in my opinion. I believe we should listen. UCF minus 2.5. They win by more than a field goal over BYU Saturday in Orlando.
All right, and the road games, of course, they outclass Wyoming, but SMU, they caught SMU before they made their quarterback switch, and SMU is a different team as of since. And Baylor, they jumped on them. Give them credit. I mean, it's part of the game, but 21-0, and they held on to win 34-28. So see if Central Florida can grab them in this spot here. All right, Paul, we talked about this last year when we were doing our conference previews, and that's North Texas. And I said, what are they doing, firing this coach? There's been like 4 out of 5 bowl games. You're the Mean Green. You're in Denton, Texas. I mean, okay. So you rather win more exciting than you'd rather lose more exciting than win in unexcited fashion. They wanted to open things up. Incarnate word. They wanted to throw it all around. It was a disaster last year, especially on the defensive end. They're putting some wins together this year, but it's still the same thing. Pace. It is almost flag football. I mean, it is really airing it out with very little emphasis on the defensive side. And here comes Tulane into town as well. And we talked about Tulane. That's been our money line automatic in our money line parlay this year. Tulane goes to North Texas here, 7.5, and the total is now at 67. It's been climbing a little bit, but man, Tulane and North Texas, there should be plenty of points in this one.
And that's what I'm looking at here, Jimmy, looking at the total. You mentioned second-year head coach Eric Morris. He certainly has the reputation of being an offensive coach. Just for a little history, he recruited actually Cam Ward out of West Columbia High School out of Houston, recruited him to FCS Incarnate Word, and that's kind of his connection there. And then Ward followed Morris to Washington State when Morris became offensive coordinator there. So forth and so on. But he is an offensive-minded coach. Defense kind of been an afterthought. You look at his first season and a half at North Texas, these first 17 games, they've allowed an average of 38.5 points per game in those first 17 games of Morris's tenure. 8 of the 17 opponents have scored 42 or more points. So they give up a lot of points. This season, they rank near the bottom of the entire FBS in several key defensive statistical categories. 125th in scoring defense, 38.3 points per game allowed, 127th in total defense, allowing almost 479 yards a game, and then 128th in passing defense, allowing just a shade under 303 yards per game through the air. So not very good defensively. In Tulane, they're revved up pretty good offensively behind the play of first-year starting quarterback Darian Mensah. Before last week, which surprised me, they only scored. Rice has played decent defense, but I was surprised that Tulane only scored 24 points against the Owls. But before that game against Rice, in their previous 3 games, Tulane had scored a total of 157 points. against Louisiana, South Florida, and UAB, so they can score. You look at North Texas again, offensively, they do run it up and down the football field. They've scored at least 41 points in their last 4 games, those opponents being Wyoming, Tulsa, Florida Atlantic, and then this past week, Memphis. I really thought, I didn't have any doubt at all, that this total was going to open in the 70s. I think it opened at 66 on Sunday, now only 67. I just think there's going to be a lot of points and a lot of yards here. Tulane and North Texas over 67 Saturday in Denton.
Yeah, I give Morris credit too, because that was Cam Ward's only offer out of high school was Incarnate Word, and I mean, and that is something. You go from one offer in Incarnate Word to the highest paid player in college football right now. So and I mean, just leading the nation in passing and everything else. So he's having a hell of a year at Miami, and some of those games they've needed every bit of it. So yeah, I'm looking for it. And because we had Tulane in our moneyline parlay last week, I watched that game very closely, and I think it's just one of the outliers, Paula. Just they were one of those games where they were in a funk early, and it took them. And then once about middle of the third quarter, they got going, and then it kind of the talent won over, and it kind of pulled away from Rice. But yeah, they were in some trouble, and it was one of those games where those dogs were very much in the game, a live dog. Let's go to Kansas State rivalry here, and you say no contest, huh? 6-1 Kansas State against 2-5 Kansas. But we talked about Kansas last week, and that's why we picked them with such a short number against Houston, is because of their 5 losses. 4 of those were by 1 score, and the 5th was just by 9 points. And of those, they had the lead in the fourth quarter in all of those games. So they score in their first 4 possessions, 28 points to build a 28-7 lead, and they cruise against Houston. Now, certainly a step up, but statistically, these teams are way closer than the overall record is concerned. Maybe some transition issues. I mean, Kansas lost their offensive coordinator. He's at Penn State, and Daniels misses him. There's no question, but this is a deceiving matchup here. Kansas is certainly, and they've got a lot to play for. They certainly could have packed it in last week, but I think they're going to give Kansas State all they could handle in a Little Apple, Manhattan this week. I'm taking Kansas, the Jayhawks, plus the 10 in this in-state rivalry.
Yeah, certainly been a disappointing season. As you indicated to this point for Kansas, Jalen Daniels, returning from injury, missed almost all of last year. He's really had some interception issues. But, you can count on the fact, they're playing Kansas State. They're playing their arch rival, and they'll have all hands on deck. They're going to come, they're going to bring all the energy they can to the field there in Manhattan. So it'll be interesting to see, where Kansas is right now and whether they can keep this game tight and get you the money there.
Yeah, 6 interceptions in his first 3 games, then 1 in the third, the fourth and fifth, and none the last 2 games against Houston and Arizona State. So maybe some transitional situation. And look, the Penn State offensive coordinator has done a pretty good job with Aller as well. Now we'll see when their schedule picks up. Also, let's go to the Sun Belt and South Alabama and UL Monroe and South. But I got to tell you, man, one of the better coaching jobs in college football this year, and first-year head coach for the Warhawks out of Monroe. They got to be over their win total already. I forget exactly what it was earlier in the season. South Alabama, Major Applewhite, former Texas quarterback and former Big 12 Offensive Player of the Year as well. They're 7.5 and 45.5 in this matchup.
Yeah, you look at these two Sun Belt teams, Jimmy, and they've played similar strengths of schedule to this point. South Alabama's schedule ranked the nation's 109th toughest, according to Jeff Sagrin. Louisiana Monroe's schedule coming in at 129th. But you look at their records, and the records are quite different. South Alabama enters this game with a losing record. They're 3-4, while Louisiana Monroe, they've had 1 winning season since 1981. They've had some 500 years, but only 1 winning season since 1981. That coming back in 2012. They come in at 5-1. As you mentioned, first-year head coach Bryant Vincent doing a stand-up job there for the Warhawks. One of the biggest surprises, certainly among Group of 5 schools, and on the cusp of their first bowl bid since that 2012 season. But even though being 5-1, Louisiana Monroe catching more than a touchdown on the road against an opponent with a losing record when they've played similar schedules. So again, this is one of those situations where I think the market is speaking to us. South Alabama currently favored by 7.5 points over Louisiana Monroe, which kind of infers that their power rating, according to the line makers, about 4.5 points higher than Louisiana Monroe's on a neutral. And I agree with that. As much as I'm impressed with ULM, their success has certainly primarily been a result of playing some pretty solid defense, winning the turnover battle, winning the other intangibles as well. But I think it's going to catch up to them a little bit at some point. The Warhawks have not been, they played a pretty easy schedule outside of Texas, but they've been a little bit vulnerable against the run. Last week against Southern Miss, and they're certainly no, rushing juggernaut, but Southern Miss rushed for 182 yards last week against Louisiana Monroe, almost 5 yards a carry. South Alabama's rushing attack, much more prolific than Southern Miss's. Their top rusher, South Alabama, Fluff Bothwell, one of the better names in college football. He averages almost 7 yards per carry. And their dual threat quarterback, Gio Lopez for South Alabama, also a threat in the running game. He averages over 6 yards a carry this season. I look for South Alabama to have some success running the ball against ULM. Give me the Jaguars minus 7.5 over Louisiana Monroe.
All right, that's our best bets for this week. We look at the high-profile games early in the week and then the best bets later. Also with some of the Michigan teams as well. Check out the videos at Sports Bettor's Paradise for my money line parlay also. For Paul Stone, I'm Jimmy Ott here in the Sports Bettor's Paradise on the Bet Rivers Network.